Every morning, just as the city began to stretch awake, Keanu Reeves walked the same route. Not because it was faster, not because it was quiet, but because of one stop he never missed. Near a small coffee shop, beside a cold stone bench, an old man sat alone. He was always there, same coat, same worn shoes, same careful posture, as if every movement had to be planned in advance. Most people passed him without looking. Some looked, then looked away. A few dropped spare change and moved on quickly, as if kindness worked better when it didn't linger. But Keanu stopped. Not dramatically, not like a celebrity being generous. He stopped the way people stop for something that matters. He greeted the old man the same way every time, simple, quiet, respectful. No questions, no cameras, no audience. Sometimes he brought coffee, sometimes a sandwich, sometimes just conversation, and sometimes silence. The old man never begged, never complained, never explained why he was there. His hands were rough but clean. His clothes were old but neatly kept. And his eyes, they didn't have the panic Keanu had seen before in people who had nothing. They had something else. Awareness. Keanu noticed small things most people wouldn't. The way the man thanked him, not overly grateful, not embarrassed. The way he listened, fully, patiently. The way he spoke, choosing words carefully, like someone who had once been used to being heard. Still, Keanu never asked, because kindness, when it's real, doesn't demand a backstory. Weeks passed, then month. The seasons changed, but the routine didn't. Morning traffic grew louder. The coffee shop changed staff twice. New faces appeared, old ones disappeared. But Keanu kept stopping, and the old man kept waiting. Sometimes they talked about small things, weather, books, the way the city felt different in the morning. Other days, they said almost nothing at all. And yet, something about those mornings felt grounded. As if both men understood that this moment, brief, unnoticed, mattered more than people realized. One morning, as Keanu handed him a cup of coffee, he noticed something. The old man's hands were shaking slightly, not from cold, from tension. Keanu didn't comment, he didn't stare. But for the first time since this routine began, he felt it. A shift. The old man glanced down the street just once, then back at the coffee in his hands. And in that brief moment, something passed between them. Not fear, not urgency, expectation. Keanu straightened slightly, his calm expression unchanged. Whatever this was, it wasn't just another morning, and neither of them said a word. By now, the routine had become invisible to everyone else. Morning crowds flowed around that corner like water around a stone. People rushed to work, phones pressed to ears, eyes fixed forward. The bench, the old man, and Keanu's brief stop existed outside their awareness. And that was exactly how it stayed. Keanu never arrived at the same exact minute, but he always arrived before the city fully woke up. It was the only time the noise hadn't yet swallowed everything. The only time conversations felt real. The old man noticed this. "You come early," he said one morning, voice steady but low. "Habit," Keanu replied. The man nodded, as if that answer made perfect sense. They sat for a few moments without speaking. The coffee steamed gently between them. Cars passed. A delivery truck rattled over a pothole. Then the old man smiled. Not wide. Not forced.
Just enough.
"You don't ask questions," he said. Keanu shrugged lightly.
Didn't feel necessary.
That earned another nod. There was something unusual about the way the man accepted help. No embarrassment, no desperation, no long explanations meant to justify his existence. When Keanu handed him food, the man took it with care, not the hurried grab of someone afraid it might disappear. He folded the wrapper neatly. He saved half for later. He treated it like something that mattered. Keanu noticed details like that. The man's coat was old, but always brushed clean. His shoes were worn down, but polished when possible. His posture, though tired, carried discipline. This wasn't someone who had given up. They talked more over time, but never about the past. They talked about mornings, about how the city felt different before most people arrived, about books Keanu had read and books the man remembered liking, though he never said when he'd read them. Sometimes the man made observations that surprised Keanu. "The loudest people," he said once, staring at traffic, "usually have the least to say." Keanu glanced at him, curious. "You've noticed that?" The man smiled faintly. "You notice things when no one's listening to you." That stayed with Keanu longer than he expected. Other mornings, the man asked about Keanu's work, not the fame, not the movies, but the process. "How do you prepare for something difficult?" he asked. Keanu thought for a moment. "I try to stay present, control what I can." The man nodded slowly. "That matters." There was no flattery in his tone, just understanding. As weeks turned into months, something subtle formed between them. Trust. Not the kind built on shared history, but the kind built on consistency. Showing up, keeping things simple. Not pretending to be more than you are. Keanu realized something one morning as he watched the man carefully fold a napkin and tuck it into his pocket. This man didn't see himself as a victim, and that changed everything. Have you ever helped someone quietly, for a long time, without expecting anything back? This question pulls viewers into their own experiences. When people reflect, they stay longer, and they comment. After that morning, Keanu became more observant. Not suspicious, just aware. The man never asked for money directly, never hinted at needing more, never complained about weather, hunger, or pain. But there were cracks. Some days the man seemed distracted. His eyes lingered down the street a second too long. Other days he'd go quiet halfway through a sentence, as if deciding whether a thought was worth finishing. Once, Keanu noticed his hands shaking slightly as he lifted his coffee. "Cold?" Keanu asked. The man paused, then smiled. "Something like that?" It wasn't convincing. Another time, Keanu arrived a little later than usual. The bench was empty. For a brief moment, something unexpected tightened in his chest. Then he saw the man standing a few feet away, speaking to a stranger. His posture had changed. Straighter, more guarded. When the stranger left, the man sat back down as if nothing had happened. "Everything okay?" Keanu asked casually. "Yes," the man replied too quickly. Keanu didn't push, because real respect knows when to wait. Still, small inconsistencies added up. The man carried himself like someone who understood structure and order. He listened like someone used to making decisions. And when Keanu mentioned a legal issue he'd read about in the news, the man corrected a detail, precisely, confidently, then stopped himself. "Old habit," he said, brushing it off. That night, Keanu thought about it longer than he meant to. People who lived on the edge didn't usually speak that way. They didn't usually choose words with that much care. Yet every morning there he was, on the same bench, at the same time, by choice. One morning, as the sun climbed higher and the street grew louder, the man looked at Keanu and said something unexpected. "You don't treat me like I'm invisible." Keanu met his eyes. "You're not." The man held his gaze for a long moment. Then he looked away, blinking faster than before. For the first time, Keanu wondered if his presence meant more than simple kindness. If perhaps it was a reminder of who the man used to be, or who he still was. Neither of them said anything else about it. But from that day on, the air around their morning routine felt different. Heavier, anticipatory, as if something long delayed was slowly moving closer. And neither of them knew, or said what would happen when it finally arrived. By this point, Keanu could sense changes before he fully understood them. It wasn't one big moment. It was a collection of small details, the kind most people ignored. The old man still arrived early, still sat on the same bench, still accepted coffee with a quiet thank you. But the rhythm felt off. Some mornings he spoke less. Other mornings he spoke too carefully, as if measuring every word before letting it leave his mouth. The ease they had built through months of routine now came and went without warning. Keanu noticed how often the man checked the street behind him. Not nervously, deliberately, as if timing mattered. Once a group of people walked past, laughing loudly. The old man flinched, just slightly, then forced himself to relax. His jaw tightened, his shoulders squared. That wasn't fear, that was control. Keanu had seen fear before. This was something else. One morning, as Keanu handed him coffee, he noticed the man's watch. It wasn't expensive in a flashy way, but it was well made clean. Carefully maintained, it didn't match the rest of him. "You keep good time," Keanu said lightly. The man glanced down, then covered his wrist with his sleeve. "Old habit," he replied again. The answer came too fast. Keanu didn't smile this time. They sat in silence longer than usual. The sounds of the city filled the gap, buses braking, footsteps on pavement, distant voices. The old man stared straight ahead, eyes unfocused. "You ever think about leaving?" Keanu asked eventually. Not pressing, just curious. The man exhaled slowly. "Every day, but you don't." "No." There was finality in that word. Another morning, Keanu arrived earlier than usual. The old man wasn't there yet. That had never happened before. Keanu stood near the bench, pretending to check his phone while scanning the street. 5 minutes passed, then 10. He was about to leave when he saw him approaching from the opposite direction. Not walking, watching. He stopped a few steps away, surveyed the area, then sat down. "You're late," Keanu said, trying to keep it casual. The man smiled thinly. Things change. Keanu nodded, but his attention stayed sharp. The man's coat was buttoned higher than usual. His hands stayed in his pockets. His posture was rigid, like someone bracing for impact. As they talked, the man's eyes kept drifting toward a black sedan parked across the street. It hadn't been there before. The engine was off, but the windows were tinted. No one got out. No one went in. After a few minutes, the sedan pulled away slowly. The old man released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Keanu saw it. "You know them?" Keanu asked quietly. The man hesitated. "No," he said. The lie landed heavily between them. Keanu didn't call it out. He didn't need to, because now he was certain. This wasn't coincidence, this wasn't random. Something or someone was circling. Over the next few days, the signs became harder to ignore. The man stopped staying as long. His replies shortened. His jokes disappeared. Once Keanu mentioned a legal case he was researching for a role. The man corrected him again, instinctively, with confidence. Then he stopped himself. "You used to work in law?" Keanu asked, half joking. The man looked at him for a long moment. "I used to work," he said. That was all. Another morning, Keanu noticed the man reading a folded document, not a newspaper. Something formal. When he realized Keanu was watching, he folded it carefully and slid it into his coat. "Important?" Keanu asked. "Once," the man replied. That answer stayed with him all day. People on the street treated the man the same as always, invisible and less inconvenient. No one looked twice. No one recognized him. But Keanu did. Not because he knew who the man was. He didn't. But because the gaps in the story were getting louder. This wasn't a man hiding from the world. This was a man waiting for something to catch up to him. One morning, as the sun rose higher than usual, the man said something that shifted everything. "You don't have to keep coming," he said quietly. Keanu looked at him. "Why would I stop?" The man didn't answer right away. "Some routines," he said finally, "and whether we want them to or not." Keanu felt it then, the weight behind the words. "What happens when they end?" Keanu asked. The man met his eyes. "Truth," he said. "Usually." They sat in silence after that. The city moved around them, unaware. Cars passed, people laughed, life continued. But something had changed permanently. Keanu didn't know what the truth was yet. Only that it was close. Closer than either of them was ready to admit. And when it arrived, it wouldn't come quietly. That morning didn't start any differently. Same bench, same street, same early light stretching across the pavement. Keanu arrived with 2 cups of coffee, expecting the usual quiet exchange. The old man was already seated, hands folded, eyes fixed straight ahead. He didn't look up when Keanu approached. "You're early," Keanu said. "So are they," the man replied. Keanu paused. "Ooh." Before the man could answer, a sound cut through the morning calm. A car door. Keanu turned just as a black sedan rolled to a smooth stop across the street. It was newer than anything else parked nearby. Clean, intentional. The kind of car that didn't belong to someone running errands. 2 men stepped out, dark suits, polished shoes, calm expressions. They didn't look around in confusion. They didn't check their phones. They walked straight toward the bench. The old man exhaled slowly, as if he'd been holding his breath for days. "Morning," one of the men said politely. Not friendly, not hostile, professional. Keanu stayed where he was. He didn't step back. He didn't step forward. His posture remained relaxed, but his attention sharpened. "Can we help you?" Keanu asked. The second man glanced at him briefly, then back to the old man. "We're not here for you," he said. "But thank you." The old man closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were steady. "I was hoping you wouldn't find me," he said. "We didn't," the first man replied. "You stopped hiding." That sentence landed heavier than it should have. People walked past them unaware. A jogger slowed, then sped up. A barista unlocked the coffee shop door a few feet away. The world kept moving, but the space around the bench felt sealed off. Keanu looked between the men and the old man. "What's this about?" The first man turned to Keanu again, more carefully this time. "Sir," he said, "this is a private matter." The old man shook his head. "It stopped being private when you showed up here." The second man hesitated. "Fair." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. Thick, organized. Labeled. Keanu noticed the old man's hands tighten slightly. "This doesn't have to happen like this," the first man said. "We can talk somewhere quieter." The old man didn't move. "No, you can say it here." Keanu felt a shift, the kind that happens right before something irreversible. The first man opened the folder. "Mr. Hale," he said, addressing the old man by name for the first time. "You've been officially declared missing for over a year." Kinu's eyes flicked to the man beside him. The old man didn't react. You were assumed incapacitated. The man continued. Until certain financial activities triggered a review. What kind of activities? Keanu asked. The second man answered this time. Dormant accounts, property taxes, legal retainers. Keanu frowned. None of that fit. The old man finally spoke. I told you I didn't want it touched. We didn't. The first man said gently. But others did. He closed the folder. You are the sole beneficiary of multiple estates, he said, and the legal owner of several properties currently tied up in litigation. Keanu felt his breath catch. This wasn't charity. This wasn't coincidence. The man on the bench, the man he'd been helping every morning, was wealthy, powerful, hidden in plain sight. Keanu looked at him slowly. You never said. I never lied. The old man interrupted. I just didn't explain. Silence settled between them. The suits waited, patient. Why now? The old man asked. Because the court won't wait any longer, the first man replied. And because people are starting to ask why someone like you chose to disappear. Keanu finally understood. This wasn't about money. This was about control. The old man stood up slowly, joints stiff but posture firm. For the first time, he didn't look fragile. He looked tired but resolved. He turned to Keanu. I didn't plan for you to be here when this happened, he said quietly. Keanu held his gaze. Doesn't change anything. The old man studied his face, as if seeing him clearly for the first time. You kept coming, he said, even when you didn't know who I was. Keanu shrugged. I still don't. That earned a small, genuine. If you found out someone you helped every day was secretly powerful or wealthy, would it change how you see them? The first lawyer cleared his throat. We need an answer, Mr. Hale. The old man nodded once. Give me the day, he said. The second man hesitated. There are risks. I know, the old man said firmly. Better than anyone. The lawyers exchanged a glance, then closed the folder. One day, the first man agreed. We'll be back. They turned and walked away, their footsteps steady, unhurried. The sedan pulled off just as smoothly as it had arrived. The street noise rushed back in. Keanu exhaled without realizing he'd been holding his breath. The old man sat back down heavily. I'm sorry, he said. For what? For letting you think I needed saving. Keanu shook his head. You did need something. The old man looked up. Company, Keanu said. So did I. They sat there longer than usual that morning, no coffee, no small talk, just the weight of what had been revealed. Keanu didn't know what would happen next. Only that the routine, the quiet mornings were coming to an end, and whatever replaced them would be louder, more complicated, and impossible to ignore. The bench felt smaller after the lawyers left. Not physically, emotionally. The space that once held quiet conversations and unspoken understanding now carried something heavier. Truth had a way of doing that. It didn't shout. It settled. Keanu stared at the empty street where the black sedan had disappeared. So you're not exactly who you let people believe you were, he said calmly. The old man smiled faintly. Neither are you. Keanu exhaled a soft laugh, then grew serious. You disappeared on purpose. Yes. There was no hesitation in the answer. For how long? Keanu asked. Long enough, the man replied. Long enough to remember who I was before everything else decided for me. Keanu turned toward him. Everything else. The old man rested his hands on his knees, fingers interlaced. For a moment he seemed older than before, not weak, but worn by weight invisible to most. I built things, he said. Companies, systems, rules that affected people I never met. Keanu listened without interrupting. People assume power feels like control, the man continued. Most days it feels like noise. He looked down at the pavement. Everyone wants something. Advice, money, influence, protection. Keanu nodded slowly, and the man said, you stop being a person, you become a resource. That landed hard. The old man glanced at Keanu. Out here I was just a man on a bench. No expectations, no leverage, no roles to perform. I needed to know, he said quietly, whether anyone would treat me decently if I had nothing to offer. Keanu absorbed that in silence. So you tested the world? The man shook his head. I tested myself. He explained what the lawyers hadn't. After decades of being surrounded by advisors and security, he had staged his own disappearance. Legal, documented, silent. He liquidated what he could, locked the rest behind layers of law, left just enough movement to avoid being declared dead until the system caught up. I thought I had more time, he admitted. Keanu leaned back slightly. Why this place? The man smiled again. No one looks closely at corners like this. The city buzzed around them, oblivious. You could have stayed comfortable, Keanu said. Private. Hidden. The man met his gaze. Comfort hides things. Discomfort reveals them. Keanu didn't argue. And you? The man asked suddenly. Why did you stop? Keanu considered the question. Because you never asked, he said. Because you didn't perform need. The old man nodded, satisfied. That's what I was hoping you'd say. There was a pause. Then Keanu asked the question that had been sitting between them since the reveal. What happens now? The old man exhaled slowly. No, I return, he said. Not to the life I had, but to finish what I started. Keanu studied him. And the money stays, the man replied. But not where it was. He explained the real reason the lawyers had arrived. Not just property disputes. A foundation. One designed to quietly fund shelters, legal aid, and exit programs for people trapped in systems that erased them. I didn't want my name on it, he said. I wanted it to work. Keanu's expression didn't change, but something softened behind his eyes. You chose invisibility, he said, to build something visible. The man smiled. Exactly. They sat there. Two men at different points in life, connected by a choice neither had planned. The old man reached into his coat and pulled out the folded document Keanu had seen days earlier. He handed it over. Keanu unfolded it carefully. It wasn't a contract. It was a letter, written in a steady hand. I wanted you to have this, the man said, before everything changes. Keanu read quietly. The letter didn't thank him for food or money. It thanked him for consistency, for treating him like a person when the world saw an inconvenience, for showing up when no one else did. Keanu folded the letter and handed it back. You don't owe me anything, he said. I know, the man replied. That's why it matters. The sun had risen higher now. The street was fully awake. The moment they'd shared every morning was slipping away. You'll stop coming here, Keanu said. Yes, the man admitted. Keanu nodded, figured. They stood. No handshake. No promises. No grand goodbye. Just understanding. As the old man walked away, his stride was steadier than before. Keanu watched until he disappeared into the crowd. Only then did he realize something. The kindness hadn't been wasted. It had been proven. The streets felt different now. The corner where Keanu had arrived each morning for months seemed smaller, almost fragile, as if it had held too much weight for too long. The old man was gone, walking away, blending back into the world he had carefully staged himself out of. And yet, the impact lingered. Keanu could still feel it in the quiet of the morning, in the way the city had returned to its usual rhythm, oblivious to what had just occurred. He stood for a long moment on the pavement, holding the coffee cup loosely in his hand. The warmth seeped through his fingers, grounding him in the moment. It was the same cup he had held countless mornings, yet today, it felt heavier, almost symbolic. He thought about the man he had helped. Not a man in need, at least not materially, but someone in need of something else entirely, recognition as a person. Someone who needed to know that humanity could exist without expectation, even in the smallest acts of daily kindness. For the first time, Keanu questioned himself. Was he helping the man for the right reasons? Could kindness ever be tested without losing its purity? He looked at the letter the man had handed him days earlier. He had read it once, then again, and each time, a different layer revealed itself. The words weren't about money or recognition. They were about attention, consistency, and presence. The smallest acts that, when repeated, proved more than 1,000 grand gestures. And now the ultimate test had arrived. Would he stop coming here? Would he let the routine dissolve because the man no longer needed him? Or would he continue, knowing that consistency mattered more than recognition? It was tempting to stop, to move on, to let the memory of the morning ritual remain unbroken in the mind like a photograph. After all, the man had returned to his life. His disappearance had ended. The need that Keanu had responded to no longer existed in the obvious sense. Yet, deep down, Keanu knew this was the point where true intention was measured. He took a step forward, and then another. Soon, he found himself walking past the same coffee shop, past the now empty bench. He didn't need to sit. He didn't need to hand over coffee. He simply stood there, observing, aware of the space, aware of the city, aware of the small traces left behind by someone who had trusted him without condition. This act, quiet as it was, felt like the hardest one yet. If someone you helped didn't need help in the way you expected, would you keep showing up anyway? The question forces viewers to reflect on themselves. It pulls attention inward, a subtle pause in brain activity that encourages comments and watch time. Because humans want to answer moral dilemmas in real life. Keanu thought about the man's words again. Comfort hides things. Discomfort reveals them. It wasn't just about him. It was about the way humans interact with one another. It was about the invisible threads connecting people through daily choices, small sacrifices, and presence. He realized now that the man's truth wasn't shocking in the legal or financial sense. It was shocking because it reflected a universal human principle. We rarely recognize the real value of our actions until they are tested, quietly, subtly, in ways that leave no immediate reward. Keanu sat briefly on the bench, the cold stone pressed against his palms, grounding him in reality. No one passed close enough to notice, but he felt the rhythm of the city around him, the joggers, the delivery trucks, the early commuters, as if it mirrored his own heartbeat. He imagined what it would have been like if he had stopped coming. If, at the first hint of irrelevance, he had walked away. Would the man have felt abandoned? Perhaps not. But Keanu would have known he abandoned something fundamental, his own commitment to consistency. This was the real test, not to help someone in need, not to receive thanks, not even to prove anything to the world. The test was to see if he could act with purpose, regardless of recognition, reward, or result. It wasn't easy. Because human nature, even his own, constantly looks for affirmation, visible outcomes, or external validation. But that morning, standing on that corner, Keanu realized he didn't need it. The quiet had a weight of its own. He imagined the old man walking away, blending into a life of complexity and influence. He imagined the letter still sitting on the bench, waiting for him to open it each morning if he returned. And then he smiled. Because the point wasn't the old man. The point was showing up, consistently, quietly, without expectation. The truth revealed by the lawyers, the estates, and the hidden wealth of the old man didn't change the lesson. It amplified it. It was a reminder that kindness, attention, and presence are measured not by the reward, but by the act itself. Keanu stayed on the bench longer than usual. He observed the city waking up. He watched people pass by without noticing, just as they always had, and he felt a quiet satisfaction, deeper than any applause, camera, or headline, because he had passed the real test. The test of selfless action, the test of showing up, the test of humanity. Some mornings, you don't know the impact of your presence. Some acts of kindness never get noticed, never make headlines. Some truths remain hidden, but showing up anyway, that's where character is revealed. And sometimes, just sometimes, the world surprises you with the full story later, in ways that make your presence feel essential, even when you didn't know it. Keanu took a last sip of coffee. The cup was empty, but it felt full. He rose, walked away slowly, and for the first time in weeks, he felt certain of something. The real test of humanity wasn't revealed in drama or wealth or recognition. It was revealed in quiet mornings, repeated habits, and unwavering presence. And for Keanu, that was enough. The city was fully awake now. The streets were no longer quiet. Cars honked. Delivery trucks rattled over uneven asphalt. Pedestrians rushed past each other, and the sunlight fell sharp on the sidewalk.
Yet,
The corner where Keanu had stopped each morning felt like its own world, a small bubble of time that had held something private, sacred, and unspoken. The old man was gone. He had walked away, disappearing into the flow of the city, as easily as he had walked in. Yet his presence remained in the quiet rhythm of the mornings, in the way Keanu thought about routine and consistency, in the small, invisible impact of showing up for someone day after day. Keanu walked past the bench slowly, noticing the details he had once ignored. The chipped paint on the coffee shop door, the small crack in the stone beneath the bench, the faded lettering of a street sign, all the things that had become part of his morning ritual. The space didn't feel empty. It felt charged, alive with lessons that could not be measured in words or money. He sat on the bench one last time, not to deliver coffee, not to talk, not to perform, just to pause and reflect. The letter the old man had handed him lay folded neatly in his pocket. He didn't open it immediately. He didn't need to. The message wasn't in the words. It was in the act, in the quiet mornings, in the repeated presence, in the way two people had shared simple moments without expectation, judgment, or display. For weeks, he had wondered if his kindness mattered, if it made any difference. Now he realized that the difference had never been measured in immediate results. It had been measured in consistency, attention, and humanity. The real reward was unseen. The old man had returned to a life of influence and responsibility. He had wealth, control, and power that Keanu could barely comprehend. And yet he had chosen to share a part of his life quietly, without dramatics, without ego, without acknowledgement. That choice alone spoke volumes. Keanu thought about the mornings he had spent there, the conversations they had had, the silences they had shared. Every small gesture, the cup of coffee, the quiet smile, the nod of acknowledgement, had mattered more than he realized. It wasn't about saving someone. It wasn't about recognition. It wasn't even about being thanked. It was about showing up. And sometimes, showing up is the hardest thing to do. There is a strange magic in routine, and in the seemingly small choices we make every day. The act of showing up, consistently and without expectation, creates impact that is invisible in the moment. And when the truth comes later, sometimes shocking, sometimes rewarding, sometimes bittersweet, you realize that the impact was always there. You just didn't see it. Keanu realized that kindness is measured in presence, not in reward. Respect is earned quietly, through attention to small details and empathy, not through grand gestures or recognition. And true humanity is revealed not when the world watches, but when no one is looking at all. He looked around the corner again, imagining the old man walking through the city streets, navigating the life he had returned to. He thought of the foundations, the legal complexities, the estates, the influence, the hidden power. And yet, in the midst of all of that, the old man had chosen something simple: human connection. A connection that could not be bought, negotiated, or faked. And that was the lesson. True strength and humanity are revealed in small, consistent actions. Showing up when no one is watching, offering help without expectation, listening without judgment. These are the things that truly matter. The world may never notice. The people around you may never acknowledge it, but the act itself transforms both the giver and the receiver. The old man's life returned to him, full of power, responsibility, and unseen struggles. Keanu's presence did not alter the outcome of legal matters or wealth, but it gave something equally vital: respect, attention, an acknowledgement of a human being, unburdened by performance, status, or expectation. The lesson is simple: impact is not always visible, reward is not always immediate, and recognition is not always given. But if you act with integrity, empathy, and consistency, you shape the world in ways that no one else can measure. Keanu stood, brushed his hands over his coat, and walked toward the busy street. He didn't rush, he didn't hurry. The city moved around him, but he carried the quiet knowledge of what mattered most. And so can we all. If this story reminded you that small, consistent acts of kindness matter, tap like. Share in the comments if you've ever quietly helped someone without expecting anything back, and how it made you feel. Let us know where you're watching from. Every morning, every person, every act counts. Some stories aren't about drama or spectacle. Some aren't about wealth or power. Some are about mornings, about coffee, about presence, about showing up quietly, consistently, and with intention. And sometimes, the most profound truths are revealed not through headlines or accolades, but through the invisible thread of humanity, one small act at a time. Keanu walked away that morning, leaving the bench empty but alive. The lesson remained: timeless and quiet kindness is powerful, even when it goes unseen.